compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version.
Life drawn with pastels. He recorded the events of the day and the dim light emitted by a flickering candle late in the evening. Abulkair Khan had given an audience during which they were drinking horse milk and eating thinly sliced meat, engaged in a pleasant conversation about women and European dances. The language barrier did not pose any obstacles to their conversation. In order to find favour with the Khan's senior wife, I took paints and a piece of paper from my pocket where I had put them in advance and started painting a portrait of the Khan with my finger. Abulkair's people were enchanted with the play of light and shadow in the picture which was being drawn. Abulkair smiled as he was not used to be posing for pictures. The portrait turned out to be very good, and the Khan's wife noticed that the face of her husband and the portrait had been painted similar, like two drops of water. It was the first time that an artist had drawn Kazakh royalty. He drew life itself with pastels. He did not praise any nationalities. He was an Englishman and considered the Kazakhs and the Russians from the viewpoint of the European culture. People in the UK are interested in him now. Perhaps everything connected with him will be found out.
We have Castle's drawings and paintings that accompany it. The original text of Castle's work.
Chapter 1. Who are you, Mr. K? Frankfurt is the largest city in the state of Hesse. There is also Bad Hamburg, famous for its resorts, and just Hamburg. According to researchers, most likely, the traveller arrived from Germany. No more exact information referring to what European winds brought the artist John Castle, also known as Johann or Jan Castle, to steppelands from Europe, has remained a mystery. His father was an Englishman and his mother was a German. Nevertheless, his unique pictures and diary have remained. His works are the first pictures of Kazakh nobility drawn in their lifetimes. The information about the events described in the diary are accurate. Its reality becomes even more obvious when compared to the report kept in the Orenburg office. Everything started in Orenburg in 1734. A group of soldiers and scientists headed by Ivan Kirillov were searching for new ways to trade with Khiva, Bukhara and India. They tried to find gold and other precious minerals. Artist John Castle was a member of Kirillov's expedition. Besides being a mere member of the expedition, he was also an artist who drew during his journey and made sketches, all of which have remained. Researchers found just a few words about the first artist who had depicted the Kazakh Khans in the archives of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Castle was enlisted there under the expedition contract for 3 years. The artist, in addition to other duties, had to teach 3 people how to paint. However, during the expedition, Castle did not teach his pupils art, which he was supposed to teach them.
They're not well known, not at all. He is an obscure figure.
It was John Castle's own decision to go to the seat of Abulkair 2 years after the expedition started. The traveller explained his decision, saying that he did it not in order to make an empty boast for a private gain, but to convince people to imitate him. However, there is another version too. His aim to go there was distant from his job. Mainly he went there because British trading companies were interested, as they wanted to find out whether it was possible to develop trading and diplomatic relations in Kazakhstan.
И развитие торговых, дипломатических коммуникаций по казахским степям.
In the 18th century, Europe started exploring new areas, including Central Asia. It attracted traders, adventurers, and scouts.
In
the 1730s, the foreign capital was entered to such an extent that even the reins of government of the Ottoman emperors seemed imaginary and showed a shady side. Thus, it was difficult to distinguish whether the mighty rulers were in certain areas or not. Chapter 2. The Prince and the Artist. Although Kassel had a desire to plunge into the steppe, the opportunity occurred when Khan's envoys arrived in Orenburg asking to send a representative of Russia to their land. But the commander did not send anybody for some unknown reason.
Мы сейчас с вами около такого знака, важного для города, где...
Now we are near a sign saying that Orenburg was founded in 1743. Orenburg was the city which had been founded 3 times but only born once. The first Orenburg was founded in 1734 on the Russian Queen's orders. Now there is Orsk. The second one was founded in the Krasnaya Gora area down the Ural River in 1735.
Теперь Орск находится по указу Анны Иоанновны. Второй в 1935 году урочище Красная гора, это вниз по Уралу.
Son of Abul Khair Joly and John Kassel met in the second Orenburg. He did his best to gain support of the Khan's heir. I stayed for almost a year in Orenburg, and this time was enough for me to establish a friendship with Joly Sultan, and even oblige him with the help of various presents and services. On June the 14th, I invited him with his escort to my place. I tried to be especially courteous, which is why they granted me favors and I won their trust. They told Kassel that 40,000 Kazakhs wanted to join Bashkir's rebels and were preparing for an uprising. Rumors say that the city had already been abandoned and the Khan needed to prove that this was not true. The traveler felt the urge to prevent the tragedy. By Russian standards, if he was a Khan, he was actually a monarch, equal to the European monarchy. However, the scheme of relationships was much more complicated in the steppe. The fact that Abul Khair was the Khan did not guarantee that all of the people were under his control and obeyed all his orders. In order to understand Abul Khair, we should have a look at the geopolitical situation in Central Asia in the first quarter of the 18th century.
Которая складывалась в Центральной Азии в первой четверти XVIII века.
John Kassel told Joly Sultan his plan. He wanted to go to the steppe and visit Kirilov to inform the state councillor about it. The Khan's heir asked the fortress commandant to let Kassel leave for a while, saying that he missed his father a lot, and if the artist drew the portrait of his father, it would be easier for him. He was about 15 years old, or a little older. In spite of being so young, Joly headed his embassy. He ran the embassy formally. Chapter 3. The Portraits of Real History. Not a few, but crowds of tourists. The State Russian Museum in St. Petersburg has 400,000 pictures and many of them are connected with the history of Kazakhstan. Nevertheless, this picture is one of the most valuable for researchers. It is a portrait of Joly Sultan. John Kassel drew this very young man who was held as a hostage in Orenburg. Therefore, we have this very colourful portrait as well. Scientists knew that the artist had drawn the portrait of one of the Khan's heirs. However, only recently it has been found out that one of the most famous museums contains this work by Kassel, and it is called Bashkir. It is not difficult to identify the person depicted in the portrait. because there is a picture of Joly in the traveler's diary.
Мы не имеем многих произведений,
We do not
которые
have
бы
many visual
передавали
works showing us their appearance and details of their garments. In this regard, the works by Castle have a tremendous importance for us.
лица и прочее. И вот в этом отношении, конечно, материалы Кэстля имеют для нас во многом сейчас уникальное значение.
Castle took this picture to the seat as a present to Abul-Khair. The group left Orenburg immediately after Joly consulted with his advisors. The traveller who spoke only German took 2 interpreters and a few sets of clothes. They did not even take any food. It took them only 4 days to reach their destination. However, news about their arrival had spread in the whole area before their arrival.
He was interested in the prospects for trade with the Kazakhs. He was also interested in finding a position for himself within the structures of the Russian state.
Abul-Khair was away. According to the artist's diary, the Khan had gone to one of his high commanders to discuss joint actions against Russia. In the meantime, they put up a Pakara tent made of white cotton, and I received multiple visitors there. All of them came to marvel at me and my German clothes. Some of them admired my stockings, others liked my boots. Some of them started going through my pockets where they found my watch. They wanted to know what kind of animal it was. I told them it was not an animal, but an instrument, which showed time and was made by people. They threw the watch on the ground, thinking that evil spirits were inside of it. Another incident occurred during this meeting. The extreme curiosity of the visitors drove Castle to despair, and his wig fell off. The sudden change in his appearance scared the Kazakhs. However, when he gave explanations, the whole village tried on his wig. Why do we find these notes made by the traveller so interesting and important? Well, the reason for it lies in the fact that he observed life of the Kazakhs. Castle recorded quite interesting facts. They include magical rituals the elders performed to find out if the arrival would be successful. The artist depicted and described this magical ritual. Besides this, his diary contains drawings showing arrows, fortune-telling, and the handshaking tradition. The traveller wrote a lot about food in his diary. He could not understand what the Kazakhs had their teeth for. He was treated to a meal and given some meat, which was cut into small pieces and put into his mouth. The most important and valuable pages contain information about Castle's conversation with Abul-Khair. A few drawings show the audience. The artist drew himself in 2 of them. He depicted himself as a vague figure wearing European clothing. When I entered the yurt, the Khan hinted that I had to be joyful that evening, as it was the reason why I'd been invited in the first place. He asked me to sit down and poured me some horse milk, and started offering him gifts, which I had brought him on purpose. They included a portrait of Joly Sultan, who was in Orenburg. His mother could not take her eyes off the portrait of her son. She kissed it and tears welled up in her eyes. Epilogue: a colourful return. The impression created by the colourful portraits of Abul-Khair and his son is completely different from the one drawn with black and white prints. The Khan's portrait, which impressed his wife Bopai with the similarity of her husband, was found 2 years ago in the Tretyakov Gallery. Nobody paid attention to the diary, which had been published in 1784, for over 2 centuries.
They were published in Riga in a very obscure dialect of German, which nowadays is not understood by many people. As a result, although this is one of the earliest ethnographic descriptions we have of the Kazakhs, and like so many of them, it's written by an outsider.
The manuscript was rediscovered by Orientalist Matveevsky in 1958, which is considered recent time by historical standards. My father wrote a book about Abul-Khair Khan, so I have known about Abul-Khair since my childhood. Castle has left hardly any information about himself, but he made a great contribution to our history. He informed us about some of the main characters of life. He drew their life with pastels.